The South China Sea tensions, behind the scenes of the Philippines-China conflict, the curse of the lost seas. Am I ready to lower my voice? Because now we're going to glide right into the heart of a boiling crisis in the world's quietest yet most dangerous geography, in the middle of the Pacific. This isn't just the story of two nations, China and the Philippines. This is a global drama about whether international law can rise like a lighthouse or be swallowed by the tides of great power. Our story begins with the waters we know as the South China Sea. When you look at the map, it might look like just an extension of the ocean, yet these waters are the modern world's most valuable and most tempting treasure, with veins of oil and natural gas flowing underneath, schools of fish teeming above, and the root of billions of dollars worth of commercial shipping annually. This sea is not simply a body of water, it is the world's windpipe. But these vital waters are under the curse of a legacy dating back centuries. With a vague M-shaped line arbitrarily drawn on maps known as the 9-dash line, China has claimed nearly the entirety of this sea as its historical backyard. This claim directly cuts across and dismisses the legal rights, or exclusive economic zones, EEZs, of all other surrounding nations, especially the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Brunei, that stretch out from their own coasts. China believes that sovereignty over these waters is a divine right inherited through ancient maps. The most dramatic and dangerous scene of the tension unfolds at a desolate coral reef called the Second Thomas Shoal, a Yungan shoal. It lies only 105 nautical miles, 195 kilometers from the shores of the Philippines, and according to international law, it is clearly within the Philippines' EEZ. The story starts in 1999 with a radical decision made by the Philippines. To solidify its claim of sovereignty, it intentionally ran aground an old, rusting World War II-era tank landing ship, the BRP Sierra Madre, onto this shoal. This was no accident. It was a floating monument to a nation's desperation and determination. Since then, only a handful of Filipino Marines have lived inside this decaying metal hulk, fighting against the storms and time. Their mission? Simply to remain there. The ship's presence serves as a flag planted in the water, shouting that the area is Filipino territory. But China is determined to stop this ghost. Their strategy is simple, yet cruel. Wait and let it rot. If China prevents the ship from being repaired or reinforced, nature will do its work, and the ship will eventually collapse under its own weight, turning the reef into an empty shoal that China can easily seize. It is at this exact point that the tension has escalated to an incredible level in recent years. Every month, the Philippine Coast Guard or civilian vessels attempt to deliver food, water, and small repair supplies to the soldiers on that ship. These resupply missions are the world's most perilous postal service. China responds with an insidious form of warfare known as gray zone tactics. This is a series of continuous, grinding actions that stop just short of declaring full-scale war. Actions that wear down, injure, but never quite cross the threshold to start a shooting war. From the fire of water cannons to the blindness of lasers, the tactics of gray zone warfare. When Philippine ships approach the shoal for resupply, they are met by China's three-layered line of defense. First come the massive swarms of fishing boats, which are civilian in appearance but organized and funded by the state. These vessels, sometimes numbering in the hundreds, surround the Philippine ships, cut off their routes, and create chaos in international waters. Then the semi-military vessels take over. These ships approach the Philippine resupply vessels with dangerous maneuvers, shoulder them, and cause collisions. Their most brutal tactic is using military-grade water cannons directly against the ships and crew. This water blast damages the ship's metal, injures personnel, and renders the mission impossible. It has even been reported that Chinese vessels use military-grade lasers to temporarily blind the Filipino crew. This is arguably the most insidious act of coercion a nation can commit against another without declaring a state of war. Each of these clashes, like a scene from a movie, makes international headlines. The purpose is not to put on a show for the world. The purpose is to break the Philippines' will, sever the supply line, and ultimately bring about the end of the BRP Sierra Madre. The Philippines' former President Duterte at one point grew weary of this pressure and tried to put the crisis on ice in exchange for economic benefits from China. However, China responded to this soft approach with only further aggression. In facing China's seemingly unstoppable expansion, the Philippines took an extraordinary step in 2013. It sought refuge in international law. It filed a case against China with the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Netherlands. And in 2016, the moment when law boomed like a giant cannon arrived. The court issued a landmark ruling. China's claim to historical rights within the 9-dash line has no legal basis in international law. The ruling confirmed that all the contested features, including the Second Thomas Shoal and the Scarborough Shoal, belonged within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Legally, this was a total victory for the Philippines. But the most bitter part of the story begins here. The powerful do not always yield to the law. China denounced the ruling as a piece of paper, declared it illegal and void, and explicitly rejected its binding nature. This rejection set a chilling precedent for the international order. It demonstrated how fragile global agreements in courts, like the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, are when faced with the will of a major power. The shadow of America and the edge of war. This crisis could not remain a purely bilateral issue, because the South China Sea is not just an area of strategic interest for China and the Philippines, but also for the United States. The U.S. maintains a Mutual Defense Treaty, MDT, with the Philippines dating back to 1951. The essence of this treaty is, an attack on the Philippines is considered an attack on the United States. The Philippines' current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., quickly reversed his predecessor's soft policy towards China and rapidly strengthened ties with the U.S. The U.S. is now explicitly drawing the red line on whether China's water cannon attacks or collisions would be considered an armed attack. U.S. defense secretaries have openly declared that this MDT covers not only the Philippine Navy, but also the Philippine Coast Guard. This sends a clear message to China. The next water cannon blast could change the entire game. Now the dimension of the crisis has shifted. By exposing its struggle to the world, by showcasing China's actions on camera, the Philippines has made international pressure and U.S. deterrence its shield. An endless tension. What's next? The China-Philippine conflict in the South China Sea currently hangs on a delicate balance that is much closer to the risk of escalation than to a peaceful resolution. Possible catastrophe scenarios are looming on the hazy horizon. The miscalculation disaster. It is only a matter of time before a dangerous maneuver between a Chinese and a Philippine vessel results in a collision, causes casualties, and quickly spirals into an uncontrollable military escalation. The end of the BRP Sierra Madre. If the BRP Sierra Madre finally collapses beyond repair due to China's gray zone pressure, China will immediately occupy the shoal. If the Philippines attempts to counter this with a physical or military response, the tension could quickly jump to outright conflict. The construction of a major Chinese island. A decision by China to build an artificial island or military facility on the Scarborough Shoal, which is closer to the Philippine coast, would be considered a red line violation by the U.S., potentially creating a direct U.S.-China crisis. The background of this crisis is asking a very simple question. Will international law or brute force define the global order of the 21st century?
The Philippines is clinging to a rusty ship, deliberately grounded, and an international court ruling in its hand, against the world's most powerful economic and military force. This silent, continuous war of attrition in the South China Sea is not just about islands and fishing rights. This is a test for everyone who believes in free seas and international law. And those weary Marines on the BRP Sierra Madre, inside that rotting ship, are standing guard not only for their own rights, but for the rights of the entire world. As those waters boil, so does the heat of global stability. And right now, neither China nor the Philippines can quite gauge how close that water is to its boiling point.